Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Joshua Sherrard, who's President and CEO of Strategic Navigators, and we'll be talking about generational wealth and radical generosity. Joshua, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
We've been talking in this series about how entrepreneurs can maximize wealth and minimize taxes and all the things that go around it, and I'm excited to learn about these two topics, and I know a few more too that we have lined up here in this talk. But generational wealth to me feels like this is a wonderful family legacy that we want to be shooting toward. And in between start and finish, if we can use some radical generosity, that sounds really fun and curious as well. So let's kind of get started with what we've been talking about with the generating wealth long-term for the business and the business owner's family, and also being able to transfer it to their family. It kind of starts with, begin with where you're at right here. And yeah, you need to begin with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey taught. But, doesn't the business owner and the entrepreneur need to kind of establish why are we in business in the first place?
We really do. I like to say entrepreneurs are cut of the same cloth. It's almost like a DNA. You go out and be industrious and create something. But a lot of entrepreneurs, I like to say we wake up in the morning unemployed, right? Because we don't work for anybody. We've got to be self-motivated, and we go out there. But at the end of the day, we're doing this to make money. And as much as everybody else is trying to make money, we now have to be stewards of that resource, because you've got a big business that you're running, you're employing people, but kind of the why are you doing all this? What's driving you? And oftentimes I'll talk to my clients and they'll say, well, Josh, I'm just doing it because that's how I'm wired. I wake up in the morning and that's what I do. Just kind of like a farmer gets up and he's got to go hit the dirt. He's got to go do what he does. And at the same time, I do think it's important for a business owner, for an entrepreneur, to really hone in on their why. What is it that's driving them? Is it a generosity play? Is it I want to make a big splash? I want to impact my community. What's driving you? And so I really try to draw that out of my clients, because if we're going to save them money on taxes, or if we're going to help them multiply their wealth and leave it to their children, now you start getting into some real philosophical questions of what's driving you.
100%, and here's something too that I hear when you say what's driving you. It is also a push and a pull. So yes, what's driving you, you don't feel pushed at that point. You don't feel like I've got to do this because it's something, laborious. When you know your why and you figure out what's driving you, all of a sudden now that is exciting for the business owner, because they're not looking at the menial details of running the business as, really hard work. They're looking at it as one step closer to my ultimate vision, my leaving a legacy for my family and things like that. It really gives a breath of fresh air, and I would suspect.
It really does. And, the why for people can be, it doesn't necessarily have to be, I just want to leave a lot of money for my kids. I know a lot of families who feel like, hey, if I leave my kids with this big trust fund, or, their trust fund babies, they're just going to be spoiled brats driving around Lamborghinis. That's not what we're trying to create, but rather understanding the value system of why, again, you're doing these things. And part of the value inside of that is passing on your work ethic, passing on your passion for whatever industry you might be in. I can't tell you how many times I talk to business owners who wish that they could pass on their passion for the particular business to their kids more than they could even pass on the money.
Yeah. Those character traits, sometimes you can't even teach. They're ingrained, but you have got to draw them out, and you definitely don't just go, here's a bunch, you hear the old cliche trust fund baby. Well, if you have a trust fund that's healthy and you have these character traits that are spectacular, now that's a recipe for success. But otherwise, you're just giving the money and it could just poof go away. So yeah, building that legacy that ties in your family values that you've been teaching your kids and family, that's where the magic happens.
Exactly. Yeah. Because those values, it doesn't make sense if you're out there away from your family earning a bunch of money and you die and you leave them a bunch of money. They're going to blow through that money. Statistics show that they're going to be through that money within 3 to 4 years. If you don't give them a set of values on how to adapt and how to use that for good, for their overall well-being. I often go to the example of John D. Rockefeller and Cornelius Vanderbilt. John D. and Cornelius were contemporaries, both, some of the wealthiest men in the world at that time. And in 1979, they held a family reunion for the Vanderbilts. And the Vanderbilts, they all gathered together, and there was not a millionaire among them. Now, some of the Vanderbilts have gone on and done other things. We can go to Vanderbilt University. We can see the impact of that family. But isn't it strange that there wasn't a millionaire kind of in that legacy? But then you go over to the Rockefeller family, and I've actually been in Rockefeller Plaza. I've been in the offices there with the family. I think they're on generation 8 or 9 at this point. It continues to grow. They have a family treasury that they've got established. They've got a lot of great values. And so when you contrast those two families against each other, you realize, hey, it's one thing to leave a lot of money. It's another thing to leave the values that even got you to the money in the first place.
Yeah. So what's it going to take for your family, the Smith, Jones, and Johnson family, or whoever that it is, to create a legacy of generational wealth that would rival the values, maybe not the dollars, but the values that some of these big names have done that you can kind of point to and put in the spotlight and go, that's huge. And, it's not an easy check the box. It's not an easy step 1, 2, 3. It's a lifelong focus. And really, you even have to have buy-in from everyone in the family. You've got to be that leader in your family to model those values so that they see how they should be following that lead as well.
Yeah. And another big piece, and I hear this over and over again, particularly for the entrepreneurs, it's not just the family, but it's the employees. It's the culture that you might be creating for the people that are working for you and around you. And, if you're the kind of leader, kind of boss, if you will, that is just kind of bossing people around and pushing them around so that they feel used and the ultimate goal is just your pocketbook, well, then at the end of the day, you're really not leaving that kind of a positive splash. You're not leaving a good impact on people, but rather if you can take them with you on the journey and they feel that their lives have been enhanced, again, the why you're doing this, the why you're in business goes far beyond the dollar. It goes into impacting lives.
100%. And it's the lives of you and your family. It's the employees. And you know what else? It's the lives of the employees' families, because now they start upping their game and learning, values from their employer, you, the business owner. And now they're modeling it for their family. And it has this broad and hopefully long, far-reaching ripple effect. And that is another rewarding aspect of being a business owner.
100%. And I don't want to downplay, Mike, the value of making money, right? Because we all know that old adage: you've got to have money to make money. And when you start getting into the certain hemispheres of making money, you can start to see some radical changes. I mean, and so there is a great value there. I like to use the phrase, you can walk around where money doesn't matter. You can walk into the grocery store. You don't have to count the pennies on what you're buying. You can. Your kids need new shoes. You don't need to worry about that. So there is a joy in having that financial freedom, not being saddled with debt, not being overwhelmed with, can I pay the bills next month? So I don't want to downplay the value of being in business to make money, but I think you have to take all of this kind of in stride. It's kind of fluid. And especially as you start to reach certain markers of success, whatever that number might be. I remember when I started, I thought, hey, man, if I can make $250,000, I'd be thrilled. I got to that point and I crossed that point. It's like, okay, now what's next? And then what's next? And what's next? And at some point you can't spend all of that every week, right? And so you've got to stop and think, okay, Now what's the right, and I love this word, what's the right stewardship of this experience, not just the dollar, but the experience?
Because stewardship brings in the aspect of responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go back into the definition of a steward, you actually think of an individual that's managing a household, right? So there's somebody else that owns that. And my background as a pastor, I'm always going to say, well, God owns everything that I have. And so for me, my guiding principles are spiritual. Now, that may not be the case for everybody, but you have to find a place where you can actually, tie down your value set. And, whether it's the spiritual realm for you or whether it's something else, you need to figure out what that is in order for you to find true success. So again, the stewardship comes from responsibility for a greater cause.
Yep. And, we're talking about not just building, but protecting your wealth. And I really feel like there's not a line in the sand that goes, okay, I'm going to use the first 10 years of my business to build wealth. Now that that's underway, let's start thinking about protecting wealth. Well, that's backwards, because as you're building, some of that wealth might be leaking out, as we've been talking about in this series. So talk a little bit about, as you get going, making sure that you're protected from taxes and fees and market crashes so that your wealth building is being as efficient as possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just it comes down to almost having a mindset of a general on a war field, right? You're looking at the field and you're saying, how do I take the field? I got to protect my flank. I've got to protect here. I've got to, protection in a situation can mean success at the end of the day. Again, another example is that football player hugging that ball and he's protecting it with one arm. That's the protection while he's running and advancing on the field. And so at the end of the day, taxes, crashes, market crashes, and fees can be some of the biggest enemies of your wealth. That's the way I like to describe them, because, here you are from a tax perspective, you make $1 million in a short period of time. If, that's on the income side, you're giving up, in some cases, 40, 50, 60% to, various taxes, federal, state, local, depending where you are. And so that can be very deflating at the end of the day. Yay, I made $1 million, but I didn't really get to take $1 million. Yep. You have your silent partner there taking a big chunk. So being properly structured and using the best tax strategies that are available to you. Now, we're not talking about loopholes. We're not talking about things that are illegal or unethical or immoral, but we're talking about things that are valid. They're by the book. They're in the tax code. We've described some of them before, and there are many of them that people can take advantage of. I think it's your responsibility to do everything you can to protect yourself from unnecessary taxes. Now, you pay your fair share, but you've got to do what you can to protect yourself from unnecessary taxes. And one of the big plays on that is, as we've described before, the Rich Man Roth, which is a vehicle where you can build your wealth inside these vehicles and never pay tax or income tax on that money, and pass it to your heirs, and they don't have to pay income tax on that money. So that's a big deal relative to some of the other things that are available out there.
It sure is, and I think the point that in this thought that we're talking about here is there are not clearly delineated start and stop of, I am now building my wealth, stop. Now I need to protect my wealth, stop. Now I need to learn how to effectively transfer it to my family after my death for estate planning. All of this, it's frustrating to think about, but all of this is happening at once. You have to build and protect at the same time, like the analogy you gave of the football player, protecting the ball and advancing. And then guess what? You need to be beginning with the end in mind, which is, how am I going to, what do I want to transfer to my family? So talk a little bit about now some effective estate planning while you're building and growing and protecting, because having some of those things in place, like through your family office services, will help to make sure all the pieces are in place as you're progressing forward.
I think, sometimes people come and ask me, Josh, when's the right time to get a will or get a trust or do the estate planning? And the time is now. You never know if you're going to walk outside and get hit by a bus. You've got to get a will in order. At the very least, put a will in order so that you can avoid probate and the government isn't deciding how your estate's going to be handled. But even taking steps beyond that, as I sit with people, I say, if you sit there with your smartphone and you take a video, hey, I want this diamond ring, or I want this asset to go to so-and-so, that actually will hold up in a court of law as you're waiting to get your will drafted. But go get your will drafted. That is something that's very, very basic. Again, it's part of how I designed my business and my team. Is we said we wanted to offer family office services where you can go and you can get your will. You can, get an AB trust if you needed an AB trust. So now you're dealing with estate taxes. If you're over the thresholds, it's 11 million so that you get per person. That always changes depending on what's going on in Washington. So you need to be aware of the laws that are changing. You need to be aware of how you can make adjustments. Estate planning is a field that has been, I would say, heavily manipulated over the years. I do feel that most people overpay for their estate planning. And they do that because they just don't know. I can't tell you how many people I've sat with and I've said, hey, do you have an estate plan? And they'll plop some big binder in front of me. They'll say, yeah, I do. I don't know what it says, but here it is. And so at the end of the day, you've got to understand it so that you can pass it on to your heirs. It doesn't help that you just went and paid some attorney a lot of money. You've got to know how it fits in to, this whole picture of not just building, but protecting and passing it on to your heirs.
And so, I think that this conversation feels like it's a progression, why are we in business? All of these points that we have to solidify and verify. And then it's not about building, but protecting wealth. So now let's talk about something here. We're talking about estate planning and the end, kind of passing along to your family and heirs. But let's take half a step back and talk about what we need to be doing, the why we're doing this for as a living legacy. Because I think that when we clarify that, we need to have some things in place for passing on to estate planning, but talk a little bit about that living legacy aspect of things.
Yeah, and I think this doesn't have to just apply to the uber wealthy, right? I can sit with somebody who's making a reasonable income, W-2 wage, and I kind of draw out three buckets. The first bucket, I say, hey, you're saving up because you want to have retirement income. That's important, right? We know that we've got only so many years that we're going to be able to earn the top dollars, and how do we put away so that we can retire comfortably? Strangely enough, that's a very American principle. The rest of the world, they just kind of work until they're done, right? And but we have retirement. Okay, so fill that bucket up. Fill that bucket to where you can have that retirement income. Then I want to skip the middle bucket and go to the final bucket. The final bucket I call the legacy, because that's where most people think. It's after I have enough to live in retirement, I want to leave so that each of my three kids gets $100,000 or whatever the number is, or however you have that in your mind. But that legacy is something people think about all the time. But the living legacy is that middle bucket. And I like to introduce that concept and challenge people, because I do believe it's possible to do more. I believe it's possible to make more money, to keep more money, to spend more money, and give more money. And the way you do that is through responsible planning. It's through that protection from taxes, crashes, and fees. It's through that using of the family office services. It's through using the RMR. I mean, if you do those things while you hit those years of, kind of that fruitful years, and you have these big stockpiles of money, you should be able to still spend that money, give that money away, and experience those blessings. I like to use the phrase, you're blessed to be a blessing. And what a joy it is to be able to go into a situation, whether it's family or go back to that group of employees that you were working with, and say, hey, how can I come alongside these people and use my success to be a blessing to them? And let me tell you, it's a lot better to do that while you're breathing than when you pass away and you leave it in a will somehow. So if you can accomplish both, which I believe that's possible through our planning, that really is where you start to hit that beautiful harmony.
In some of our talks previously, we've talked about found money, where you work with some of your clients and say, okay, you're already paying X in taxes. What if we make some of these shifts and now you're paying Y, which is much less? So you're not having to make more money. You're finding money that's you're already paying out, and now you're showing them how to pay less. So with that found money, look at what we can do. Yes, we can fund this and retirement, all these different things, but also now with some of that found money, we can be a blessing to other because we've been blessed with a connection with Joshua Sherrard to help me find this money. And now how can I use this to be a blessing to others? How can I be generous with that found money? That's a pretty amazing concept that a gift that you're able to give to your clients.
And I love it because it really forces you to think differently. You're not under the gun of, oh my gosh, do I have enough to retire? I mean, I love sitting across the table from someone, and when that aha moment happens where they realize I don't have to sell my business to have a retirement, and they realize that, instead of selling the business for, multiples and, you're worried about private equity or whoever else, keep the cash cow in the barn. And now you can just restructure things so that the business continues to kick off money and income for generations to come. That's what some of the wealthy families, you go to Sam Walton and how his enterprise ended up doing that. I mean, it's just kicking off money. You go to the Post family and you see how they did that. You can go back to J.C. Penney or to the Sears. I mean, all these names that we all recognize, at the end of the day, they kept the cash cow in the barn. They were able to use strategies like what we deploy, and they're able to have generational impact, with that wealth and with that splash. And depending how you're wired and depending what's important to you, again, that concept of blessed to be a blessing. One of the things I love about the legacy building that we do is we do something called double dipping. You're able to double dip in a lot of ways into that retirement money through what you talked about earlier, this found money that we come up with. And now, instead of saying, do I have enough to accomplish one thing, it's not only do you have enough to accomplish one thing, but now you got to think of what else you're going to accomplish because you have so much. I mean, talk about great problems to have.
Well, doesn't it also raise your awareness, raise your perception, raise your possibility? You think of the old Robert Schuller talks, possibility thinking. Well, it really does. You're kind of in this box and you've got blinders on. It's like, well, I guess this is the way things are. But now with some of these principles you're teaching your clients, it's like, wow, I can really do a whole lot more. And you're opening my eyes to possibility.
It is, and I come back to kind of the why that we were talking about at the top of the conversation. I believe we're all built with a purpose, and whether you were built to be a farmer or a mechanic or a lawyer or a doctor or an entrepreneur, you were built with a purpose. And I go back to a quote from an old movie. It's called Chariots of Fire. You ever hear that movie? You ever see that movie long ago, Mike? Yeah. It's a great movie.
Eric Liddell, I think is the name.
Yep, Eric Liddell, and he was an Olympic runner, and he was being interviewed, and he was fast, and he said, "God made me fast, and when I run, I feel the glory of God." And it's just one of those things. And you talk to somebody who is passionate about being a firefighter, passionate about being a doctor. And if they can feel that joy in doing what they were called to do, what they were built to do, and now they're making money in the midst of it, and now they can kind of spread that around, they can leave an impact in the world. You talk about introducing concepts like radical generosity into that, where again, it's not just giving away dollars, it may be giving away time, it may be giving away, teaching apprenticeship, influencing the staff around you. All those types of things, influencing your clientele. I mean, I think when you start to think outside yourself and not just feel bogged down with, do I have enough money to survive? But now you've changed your paradigm to, how do I think outward and how do I go make a big splash in the world? How am I blessed to be a blessing? I love that. I truly believe when you take that mindset on, you're not only going to accomplish what is in front of you, you're going to be surprised on what is out there and what you can do.
And I think that each little step you take outside of that, not comfort zone, but that known zone, right? Oh, this is all I know, but you take this one step outside of that, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I could do a little bit more, and it starts motivating you. And I love the concept of radical generosity because it is not just writing the bigger check and the bigger check. It might be unannounced and unprompted generosity. That could be radical because in these days, people barely smile at each other or hold the door for each other. So if we are generous and then we are radically generous with maybe a buck here and there, but maybe some unprompted, unannounced kindness, that really ties back into, you know what, I am so blessed because, my eyes have been open to new possibilities because I've got a whole new lease on my business, not lease, but a whole new perspective in my business because my why has been clarified. I'm doing this for a purpose for my employees, for their legacy, family legacy, for my family legacy. And then that allows me to feel like, man, you know what? My cup's running over. How can I give more and be radically generous and be a blessing to others?
Yeah, and it is more blessed to give than it is to receive. And I truly believe that as an entrepreneur, again, that's my primary audience, but I think we can still talk about this for everyone. It doesn't matter if you're my 10-year-old who I'm teaching this to, or whether you're at the sunset of your career. When you step out and you're able to bless someone, I think about an experience that I had not too long ago at the gas pump. Gas prices these days are through the roof. And, I'm over there. I'm not, I don't like the fact that they're higher, but I can swipe my credit card and I can fill my gas tank up. But I looked at the next pump over and there's a guy, I don't know what he did. I don't know what his career was, but I could tell he was stressing about what he was able to put into the tank. So I walked over and I swiped my card and I put it in his tank as well, and does that hurt me? It doesn't hurt me because I've been incredibly blessed. I'm a successful entrepreneur, but man, did it feel good to fill his tank. And to say, hey,
literally and figuratively.
Exactly, literally and figuratively. And, whether it's you believe in the pass it on concepts or whether you believe in the spiritual benefits of that or whatever it is that you're believing in, it is good. Somebody once made the comment, if it's in your power to do good, do it, right? And that's that radical generosity, stepping out, doing those things, and it doesn't have to be a gas tank. It can be your employees, giving them a bonus because you save more money in taxes. It could be, your own kids being able to show them how you do those things. But all the things that we're talking about here really codify in being that effective entrepreneur, being effective captain of your ship, if you will, as you navigate these waters.
Well, funny you should say codify and navigate these waters because I feel like through this series of conversations we've had, it has been literally a blueprint, a charting of the course of success for people personally and professionally as business owners. And here we're coming to the point where we go, okay, now what? How do we chart that course? How do we raise our sails and let the wind take us in the right direction, pointed in the right direction based on these, codified principles? Let's kind of wrap up with, how do we raise the sails and chart that course?
Yeah, it's funny. There's an old quote that I think about when I think about that. The pessimist says there is no wind. The optimist says the wind will come. And the realists adjust the sails. Yeah. And so, really, it's time to harness the wind. It's time to adjust your sails. And I come back to readjusting your structure as a business owner. I come back to, are you using the right tax strategies? Do you have a tax shelter called an RMR, Rich Man Roth, to be able to protect you from taxes, crashes, and fees? And people may say, well, I'm waiting until I reach X level of success before I start building these things. And the answer is no, you don't wait to do those things. You do that now. If you start raising the sails now, if you start adjusting the sails now, if you start figuratively, charting a better course now, you're going to reach those goals and exceed them in the near future, and really, I feel like what we do at Strategic Navigators is we give clientele more resources so that they can do what they do better. And that's really what I love about saving people money in taxes and addressing these concerns, because at the end of the day, I believe people are gifted in amazing ways and they can make an incredible splash in their world. I just encourage them to move now. It's time to get off the dime. It's time to not fret about how things look, but rather, like I said, harness the wind.
And you talk about being urgent but measured, and that reminds me of taking risks but taking calculated risks. Let's not be crazy. So when I hear about charting the course, talk a little bit about when someone comes in and goes, okay, I'm loving what you're talking about, show me my blueprint. And is it, using the sailboat as an analogy, is someone in the bottom of the boat not seeing where you're going and just trusting that Josh is taking us in the right direction? Or is it something where you're like, okay, let me show you, here's where we are now, here's where we're going to head, the luxury destination, and you can sit here and you can watch every turn along the way and you can see the sights and enjoy it, knowing we're heading in the right direction. So what do people feel like when you clarify for them, and then when you're showing them each step of the way and they're seeing the progress?
Yeah, well, Mike, entrepreneurs just have a sense that they need to be the captain of the ship, and I love that because they're good at it, and we want them to be the captain of the ship. And as strategic navigators, we want to come alongside them as a navigator and show them, hey, you got to avoid this, or you've got to go this way, and you've got to choose this thing, and that's the way that you can be protected from taxes, from fees, from crashes, and have better income. So there is a sense of urgency because we want to save you money now. But it's measured, and we want to make sure that you're being very tactical in terms of where you're investing and how you're investing, when you're selling your business, the timing of that. Do you even need to sell your business? So those are conversations that we have. We come alongside them, and again, I love that concept of growing with our clients so that they can experience all of that journey of success to significance.
I love it. And, it really is something where sometimes you just have that feeling of clarity when you see your starting point now, you see in the horizon where we're headed, and then you've got the captain of the ship guiding the process, and you're going along and you understand every step of the way. So for a business owner listening to this going, maybe I need to have a little bit of that charting of the course, what's the best way that someone could reach out and learn more as well as connect with you?
Yeah, I always tell people to go to our website, stratnavinc.com. There's a contact us form there. You can call our office, and all of our initial consultation is complimentary. Would love to have a conversation with them to be able to help take them from success to significance.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you coming back on. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.